Good morning to those just joining us. We're just letting everybody in from the waiting room, so thank you for your patience.
Good morning.
Paul, I can see you just up the road.
Oh, hi Richard, hang on. Yeah,
Hello.
there you go. I'll take the dog for a walk later and knock on your door.
Okay.
Good morning or good afternoon again to those just joining us, and in particular to the cohort from India through the FCDO programme. I should have probably have to say good late afternoon or good early evening to you people from India because of the 5.5 hour difference in the time. We're just letting everybody in from the waiting room at the moment, so thank you for your patience. How are we getting on, Oriana? Are more people coming in? Looks like we're up to about 50
Yes, now. They're slowly but surely all coming in.
Okay, good.
I guess if you want, you could start, and I'll just keep letting them in as they come along.
Yeah, I'm just going to say a few words of welcome and introduction, so they can pick that up as we start. The attendees and registrants are not here to listen to me. They want to hear our speakers, of course. So I'll start now, Oriana, and keep letting them in as you say. So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Martin Garratt, and I'm Chief Executive of Cambridge Cleantech. A happy New Year to everybody, if it's not too late. I'm probably just around the time of January when you're not allowed to say Happy New Year anymore, so that's probably the last one from me. But a warm welcome to our Finance Special Interest Group event on Never Mind the Pandemic, Brexit and Trading Issues. This is fundraising for startups. Let's be positive, basically. And I'd like to say a particular warm welcome to our Act for Green cohort of cleantech companies, some of which are from India and some of which are from the UK. We're undertaking a training programme for those companies and supporting them with access to finance, and that's on behalf of the UK Government FCDO Department, or Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, as it is now known. So warm welcome to that cohort in particular, and of course to all of our members more generally. Got a great, terrific lineup of speakers for you this lunchtime. I just wanted to mention a couple of things before that. In terms of housekeeping, if you could just keep yourself muted. If you have a question, please do use the chat room box, which is in the centre of your console. Just type something in and we'll pick that up. And if it's a pressing question, I'll ask the speaker at the end of their session, or if not, we can leave it to the Q&A at the end. And then just to mention a couple of things on a business perspective, from a Cambridge Cleantech point of view, we're obviously keen to support cleantech companies as they seek to grow and prosper. In terms of our event and in terms of access to finance, we've got obviously this event today, and then we have a Cleantech Venture Day, which is now been scheduled for the 25th of March. The application process for that for SMEs to sign up and to apply to be one of the pitching companies to a digital room full, if you will, of investors will be open fairly soon. So watch this space for that. And just in terms of contract opportunities, you know we always have a commercial outlook at Cambridge Cleantech. So there are two corporates that are looking for innovators and ideas to help their businesses at the moment. First of all, Deutsche Telekom, who are a founder member of Cambridge Cleantech, are looking for solutions in terms of energy, renewable energy production, energy management of the systems, storage, their electrical vehicle fleets, and how all of that is managed. So basically how all of that comes together. So it's quite a big ask they're looking for, but there might be components of that as an SME you could be able to supply. So look on our website if you think you can answer that call for innovation. And also a company called Tim Electronic from Northwest Europe. They're looking for smart wind turbine controls. So again, if you're in that field, do take a look at that on our website put in your response to them, and let's see what happens. So that's a bit of background from me, but with no further ado, let's get on to those all-important speakers, and we're going to start off this lunchtime with Ross McNaughton, who's a partner at Taylor Wessing, one of our associate founder members. And Ross is going to talk to us about, never mind the pandemic, Brexit and trading issues, let's be positive. We're going to talk about fundraising opportunities for startups. So Ross, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Martin. And I'm going to try and share my slides here as well. So if I just go. So hopefully, okay. So can everyone see my slides? Yep. Okay, great. So yeah, so thank you very much, Martin.
We can't see your slides at the moment.
Oh, you can't. Oh, hang on a minute.
I saw it a moment ago, though. Yeah, no, it's fine.
Hang on, I'm going to try and move it to a different screen. 1 second.
It came and then it disappeared, Ross. So
yeah, so share screen. So okay. Hang on a second. Forgive me. All right, so hopefully you can see the slides now.
Yes, yeah, that's good, Ross. Yeah, please, yeah,
all right,
that's great. Thank you.
So, so apologies for that, and yeah, so it's nice to meet everyone, albeit virtually today, and and thank you very much for joining, Martin. Thank you for the intro. So I've got a 10-15 minute slot just on fundraising for startups in the context of the backdrop that we find ourselves in with the pandemic. And just by way of introduction, believe it or not, Taylor Wessing is one of the leading tech firms. I know I didn't really do as much justice with with my tech prowess just now, but I think we got there in the end. But yeah, so my name is Ross McNaughton. I'm a tech and life sciences lawyer based in the Cambridge office. Taylor Wessing itself is a worldwide law firm with 28 offices. We do a lot of investment work, help a lot of companies from cradle to liquidity. In 2020, we did 278 deals across our UK corporate team, of which about 220 were financings. So we are here to look after companies as they look to scale and grow. And here is our key sector focus. But I'm not really here to talk too much about the firm. What I want to talk about is the broader backdrop to the investment environment, and also the various fundraising routes that are available to companies that are looking to scale and grow. So just first of all, I mean, obviously we find ourselves 10 months into a pandemic. The world obviously tilted off its axis a little bit for the first couple of weeks there at the end of March last year and the beginning of April last year as well, until things settled down. And in the fundraising environment, that did have an effect as well in the early stages, but it didn't take long actually for people to adapt. And although we're waiting on the sort of full numbers to sort of percolate from 2020 in terms of how investment did, I think everyone is expecting a pretty strong showing. On the slide here, I've got some stats from 2019. I should note that this is taken from the Tech Nation report. But all in all, the backdrop and level of investment and level of international investment is all showing a very, very strong trend. So, I mean, just taking a couple of stats from the slide there. So, the UK is Europe's top scaling tech nation. That 10 billion figure of VC investment into the UK was an increase of 44% from 2018, and you'll see that a good chunk of that, almost half, was from overseas investors as well. And Cleantech is not, it is a big part of that. So I mean, that 17.93 billion number is worldwide, but there was, I think it was about 2 or 3, I think about 3 billion or so was invested into clean tech related investments in that year. And again, although we're waiting for the figures for 2020, I am expecting them to be, to be pretty strong. So again, I think the message is that although things, the pandemic has thrown up a lot of different challenges, etc., and particularly from operational and logistics side of things for a lot of companies that are on this webinar today, the actual investing backdrop is still pretty healthy. And then moving on, this slide also just goes to kind of breaking down a little bit as to what clean tech is, because some, depending on how you look at the stats, some of them don't lump them all together as clean tech, and so you have to look around for companies that are in artificial intelligence, things like climate modeling, deforestation mapping, that sort of thing, robotics. I'd add materials maybe onto that. That's an element that makes up clean tech as well. And then of course, Internet of Things as well is another kind of subset of tech that can fall within the sort of broader clean tech environment. But you kind of tot all those together, and again, numbers are up. And so just in those areas alone, there was 73% more VC investment in 2019 than 18. Again, based on those same stats I quoted earlier. So I think again, just to kind of reiterate that the backdrop is pretty strong. So just to, and again, I'm sort of conscious of time, so I'm going to rattle through these, but just in terms of the fundraising opportunities and avenues available to you, the tools that are available in your toolkit to scale and grow your business. So I mean, in my mind, there's effectively 4 ways of raising money and growing your business. So one is organic revenue growth. 2 is to take in some form of debt, whether that's just overdraft facilities, or for slightly more advanced companies, for some form of venture debt. That's another alternative. Another, of course, the third one is grant funding. But then the final one, and this is the one I'm going to talk to today, are ways of raising money through equity or quasi-equity. And this breaks down in itself into probably these 5 different topics. So equity, convertible loan note, advanced subscription agreement, a simple agreement for future equity or a SAFE, and option grants. So just taking those each in turn. So with an issue of shares, this is a common way that companies get off the ground and get running. So they'll founders will set the company up, incorporate on Companies House with 1 or 2 founders, and then we'll go out and raise some money by way of a seed or a pre-seed round, maybe, through the issuance of equity itself. And so that is a full-on issue of shares to the investors. In some ways, this is more straightforward. It's clear once that has been done what the cap table looks like. There's also the ability for companies that would qualify to get EIS and SEIS monies in. And for those of you that don't know, EIS and SEIS are tax incentive schemes, or a tax framework here in the UK to encourage investments into earlier stage companies, and it gives the investors tax breaks effectively for the money that they invest. And for companies, it can be a really good be a really good way of raising money, particularly in those early stages, because particularly high net worth individuals, the tax breaks are attractive, and therefore a good way of getting money in from high net worths, from angels, etc. the kind of the downside to issuing equity is that they can come with complex share rights. So it may be the case that the investors coming in want some specified rights and investor protections around their investments, and that's when you get into sort of fairly complex, well, relatively complex issues like, you know, liquidation preferences and, you know, potentially you know, still drag along, tag along, co-sale rights, all that sort of stuff, which is beyond the scope of the time that I have today. But, you know, obviously very happy to take questions on any of those things. But it does mean that the documentation itself becomes a little bit more complex, and it does mean that there's a sort of lengthier process that's put around it, and additional sort of cost that's added on top. It also crystallizes the value, and so the valuation of the company is then, you know, set when you issue shares at a particular price per share. And obviously, as you're looking to scale and grow the business, it's incumbent on you to make sure that when you go for a next funding round, you've sufficiently increased that valuation to get new investors comfortable. And then, of course, dilution, as opposed to sort of non-dilutive options like debt, like grant funding. This does dilute the founders because the investors coming in are being given a percentage ownership of the company. Another way of doing it might be through a convertible loan note. This is a bit quicker. You see these often in early financings and or bridge rounds. And so what an investor will do is put money in through a convertible loan note, which is effectively debt, and that loan note will convert on a future funding round. These can be a bit complicated, particularly when it comes to the conversion mechanics. There's obviously additional dilution on conversion. It remains as debt until converted, and it's not typically SEIS or EIS eligible. And so what some people do to get around the SEIS and EIS point on the convertible loan notes is they'll go for an advanced subscription agreement. So this is where you can put your money in early, effectively. And so you can look to invest as a company. You take money in through an advanced subscription agreement, use the money immediately, but then issue the shares further down the line when you actually pull together a round itself. And so that this can be quite a useful tool when, you know, you're in pretty good talks with, you know, a large investor to do a reasonable size investment rounds, but you've got a few high net worths who want to put some money in the interim. And so this is a good way of kind of drip feeding some of that money in earlier, and they may be able to get SEIS and EIS treatment on that.
2 minutes to go, Ross.
Okay, so then finally, I'm just going to talk about a SAFE very quickly, just in case you ever come across this. A SAFE is it's a simple agreement for future equity, but it's a bit similar to an advanced subscription agreement, US concept, and has started to make its way over here, but operates in the same way. And I'm going to skip over the option grants because these are very effective, but a way to incentivize staff and consultants going forward. What I did want to spend 1 minute talking about is the National Security and Investments Bill, because this is super important and it's coming down the line. It's not received much attention yet, but it's some law that's going to have a pretty wide-ranging impact on investments going forward. And so there are going to be 17 key sectors that are going to be specified. And if you fall within one of those sectors, and they include advanced robotics, advanced intelligence, engineering, biology, and you get an investment of more than 15% in your business, then when this comes into force, assuming it comes into force on its current terms, then you're going to have to get advanced approval from the government as it currently stands. This is going through Parliament at the minute. I've put in my Twitter handle there. Feel free to follow me for updates on that, because we're following this extremely closely. It's going to be a big feature of early finances going forward. So with that whistle-stop tour, Martin, I'll hand back to you. And I'm obviously happy to take questions afterwards.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Ross. I think we might need to come back to that particular topic as we get to find out more about it as we get closer to April. So thank you for mentioning that as well. But overall, that was terrific for setting the context in terms of what is happening in the UK and globally in terms of investment into tech and into clean tech. And it was a sort of an overview of the theory, if you will, of how you can sort of raise funding for businesses. But let's now turn to one of our long-standing members who have just raised, I think it's £1 million that you've raised, Hamish. So I'd like to welcome Hamish Watson, who's the Chief Executive of Polysolar, who's going to give you the sort of, if you've just heard about the theory, we're going to see this is what it's like in practice to get the T-shirt, the scarves and everything else, if I'm not mixing my metaphors. Over to you, Hamish.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you all. I shall try and share my screen. Hopefully I won't have any technical problems either, but one never knows. So try and get you all on. Can you all see that?
We can indeed. Thank you, Hamish. Off you go.
Lovely. So I shall briefly introduce myself and the company. I'm founder and CEO of Polysolar. We are a producer of transparent photovoltaic glazing. That basically means glass that produces electricity, but you can see through it. So it's suitable for facade cladding right through to bus shelters, you name it, anything which basically uses glass. What I wanted to talk today about was, rather than talking about the company, is talking a little bit more about our funding experience, which is actually fairly recent relative to the age of the company. And it's really to talk about crowdfunding in particular, and in particular our recent raise, which was as a convertible loan note through crowdfunding and then being matched by the government's British Business Bank's Future Fund. And I'll tell you a little bit about that, which is still available to people. So it may be relevant moving forward on that front. I won't go into sort of specific details of that because I'm not a financial advisor and would probably be putting you all in a very difficult position if I do so. So I shall tell you our experience rather than anything else. Sorry. Excuse me a second, sorry. So bear with me a second, sorry. I've just got a slide.
I like your style, Hamish. You're keeping everybody on tenterhooks as to how
Yeah, no. So it was only
how you got your £1 million.
You had the wrong presentation. Unfortunately.
Okay.
So hopefully this time round, this will be the right one that you'll
okay.
see. No, escape.
You've got the right title.
Yeah, when I expand it up, it doesn't seem to come to the right one. So if you don't mind just seeing a bit of background, everybody.
That's okay. I just crack on in the time we've got.
I think we'll leave it like that.
Okay.
But Ross, you're not the only one having problems on the technical front. So just to give you a little bit of background about our financing history, the company was established back in 2007, and we initially actually did a private placement in the City of London in 2008 with raising quite a lot of money with an Icelandic bank, which then promptly went bust at the start of the financial crisis. And that put the kibosh on that one. The company then subsequently post that was then financed through a combination of grant funding and our own money. And was profitable as an operating business up until a couple of years ago, when we had the opportunity to raise funds to significantly try and expand the business. And we did that through crowdfunding. The platform that we used was a company called Crowdcube, who are, I believe, the largest operator now in the market. Crowdfunding to some people is a fairly new experience, but its primary advantages from our point of view was that it's a relatively low cost route to raising funding, i.e. the legal, financial, advisory services that one's bringing on board and during a fundraising can be tied up within the crowdfunding platform, and therefore reduces the cost of that. The other element of it is also that you are the one setting the price, and that can be a significant advantage to people. Although equally you can get the price wrong, so be wary on that one. And in recent years, the credibility of crowdfunding has improved. It was sort of seen as a very much sort of thing that you do as a sort of fairly small sector businesses like brewing, where you're raising money between your mates and basically getting the money in that way, to being much more of part of the established funding system. So as I said, we did a fundraise a couple of years ago. We raised 1.5 million on Crowdcube. This is the sort of front page of what you see when you go onto a crowdfunding platform. Basically, this is the company's presentation to the world to make you invest. And therefore, it's quite important that you make this as the sort of, this is the key element. This is promoting your business, but it's being promoted online. And to be honest, in the current pandemic world, it's actually quite a good experience to have gone through before we got there, because we have some idea of how you promote in the truly electronic world. In terms of the suitability of crowdfunding for companies, it is very much sort of dependent on what you're after, and also how you're able to present your company. The main driver, obviously, for a lot of investment into small businesses, the EIS tax relief element, and most crowdfunding operations are able to provide that. So I think the sort of key things to try and get across here is one, that it needs to be a reasonably easily understood proposition. There's little point in putting something forward which is impossible for people to understand. So a lot of the sort of software type element that doesn't have a sort of clear answer may not be particularly suitable. For us, selling glass which produces power, it's a reasonably straightforward proposition. The other element is you need an established track record. You do need to be able to show that you've done something before, because this is, after all, what the investor is relying on, is that you do exist, you're able to produce something. And with Polysolar having had a decade of development and work behind it, and example projects, that wasn't a problem from our point of view. The other element I also push in there is that it needs to be a big opportunity. If you're looking at the risk element for startup company investment, it needs to have a big outcome to warrant that investment. And so if you can offer that with the big ambitions behind it, then that's equally important. And then I guess the other key sort of point in terms of crowdfunding is also the importance of getting across your message effectively. And that is done primarily on a crowdfunding platform, an equity crowdfunding platform like Crowdcube, via a video. So that video is really what's selling your business and promoting that business to the investor. I'm not sure I've got enough time on this particular occasion to show you some of the videos, but if you are interested, if you go to those sites, and I might come back to them, you'll be able to look at the videos to get some idea of what we presented as a video. We used a professional video company to do that. You can do it obviously on your own, but it is important that you get that across.
2 more minutes, Hamish, please. 2 minutes.
Sorry, I'll try and speed up. So along comes the COVID crisis. We had money in the bank. We didn't need to do a fundraise, but we did think that this could run for quite some time and was going to have a significant impact on the economy going forward. So we decided to do another fundraise. The stimulant for that was the Future Fund, which the British Business Bank organises on behalf of the government, where the government matches the funders' investment. Now, you need a lead funder who is willing to put in money to support that investment programme. And we used Crowdcube to do that. Now, Crowdcube, we were the first company actually to do a convertible loan note on Crowdcube for the Future Fund, and therefore it was very much sort of a learning curve. And we initiated this back in April and did the actual fundraise in July, just to give you a better idea. The other sort of element just to be aware on here is that there is a loan cost behind this. There's an 8% interest on this, and there's also a dilution element as well, where there's a preference for the shares. The other element to understand, though, is you do need to present more than just a story of survival. You do need to present a story of going forward. In our case, we've been recently very successful within the electric vehicle charging market, producing canopies and solutions behind that. And that allowed us to have a new story to tell, not just the old story replicated, which again is important, I think. So we did a raise on Crowdcube, again, as a convertible loan note rather than as pure equity. In hindsight, the equity market proved to be much stronger, and maybe we could have done direct equity investment. But the advantage of a loan note is you're not setting a price. The price is when it comes to fruition. And in this case, with the Future Business Bank, it's in 3 years' time. They dictate the terms of that. And therefore, the legal costs and everything else are very minimal for us to have gone through this process. We raised 1.14 million on Crowdcube, and that is now matched by the Future Fund. So we've in total raised 2.2 million pounds, and the outcome of that will be that either we have an exit route before those 3 years when that loan matures and converts into equity, or alternatively we will wait until that point. But clearly we need to raise the value of the company over that time to make sure that that's done.
Okay.
So just briefly, the investment process is one where you seed the market with the crowdfunding. You tend to have a rapid rise to start with. Then you have a steady flow. And what's interesting about it in both occasions for us is it's been steady upward across the period of time you had it. We had it on for a month. And then at the end, you have usually a peak as well. And just in terms of being viewed pitches, you also need to keep that rolling the whole way through. So you do need to keep on releasing stories and keep on releasing news to keep on people coming onto your site. So just in summary then, just to close on this, we took an opportunity to raise money for what we saw as a sort of oncoming juggernaut of the COVID crisis. Whether we needed to or not is perhaps time will tell, but I think it was sensible for us to do so at the time. The issues really you need to understand is make sure that the platform you're using is the right one, your investment platform. Invest in a professional video is very important. Get your message across. You must get your message across. That's the important thing. Consult widely on the business plan itself. and make sure that you've got enough input from everybody, because this is a public offering in many respects. You need to secure some early stage investors in that to get the whole ball rolling, otherwise it won't get off the ground. And you know fairly soon, usually with crowdfunding, whether it's going to work or not. Use your investor base to push that as well, develop that campaign momentum to keep it going, and ultimately deliver a strong close on that. And you should be able to raise the funds that you require. But certainly from our experience, crowdfunding route has been very successful to date. And equally, the convertible loan note has been an attractive proposition for us as well. So thank you very much, everybody.
Hamish, thank you very much. Fantastic. Some great hints and tips there from somebody who's been through that process and successfully secured chunks of funding twice through the crowdfunding route. There's a couple of questions, but I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to come back to those in the Q&A at the end. And next, introduce Jeremy Hyde, who's the Regional Director for the FD Centre. And Jeremy's going to talk to us about future-proofing your SME during this pandemic. Jeremy, great, you put your screen up already. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin, and good afternoon, everyone. Well, what a year it's been, or 12 months, I should say. COVID, Brexit. Has there ever been a more chaotic 12 months for businesses? And I don't know about you, but back in March last year, when the first lockdown was announced, I was really worried about what was going to happen to our economy. And I have to say, I have complete admiration for the SME community, for leaders of small businesses, and the resilience that they've demonstrated over the past few months. And whilst I thought it was going to be a lot worse, it's fair to say, yes, it's been difficult, there's been challenges, and there have been casualties, but most of our clients have managed to survive through this, and indeed some have actually thrived during this environment. And with the right financial management, a business will continue to perform in difficult times. And those tools and techniques for managing the finances of your business effectively still apply in these difficult times. And so this afternoon, I want to spend a few moments just to share some of those with you and share with you key aspects of effective financial management, which is basically the role of the finance director or CFO. And I know many businesses are probably too small to have a full-time FD, and that's where the part-time FD model works really well. So the key aspects of the role that I'm going to share with you this afternoon are strategic financial management and operational finance. So let's kick off with strategic financial management. And in order to do that, I'd like you just to take a moment to think about what it is that you want from your business. All successful business journeys start with the end in mind. So what's your end in mind? It might be to grow your business and exit in a few years' time. It might be far more important than that, like help save our environment. It really doesn't matter what it is, as long as you have one. And from there, we can reverse engineer and identify those key steps that will take us from where you are today to that end in mind, your strategic plan, your sales and marketing plan for attracting and selling to customers, your operations plan for identifying how you're going to deliver the products and services, and of course your financial plan, which underpins the entire business strategy. And that leads on to the funding, as we've heard already. And it may be, ideally, your business strategy is self-financing based on organic growth, but very often you'll find that exciting, ambitious plans will require some form of financing in the early stages. Debt, equity, crowdfunding, as we've seen from Hamish, is a great source of funding in early stage companies. Invoice financing is another great one for businesses with rapid sales growth. And the FD will help you select the right source of funding for your business. And it's important to say at this point that it doesn't end there. Putting the strategic plan together isn't just for helping you raise funding and then put it on the shelf and look at it in a few years' time. It's very much a way of running your business. It's central and fundamental to its existence and its operations. And it's important that it's part of everyone's day job as well. And the FD will help you bring it to life in your organisation. We all get caught up in the day-to-day, operations we've got to get done. But we should also have one eye on that big picture. What have we got to deliver this month, this quarter, to take us towards that end in mind? And it doesn't end there. As we've seen from the past 12 months, we operate in a dynamic environment, and we need to continually adapt and evolve our plan to make sure. Now, the end in mind may well stay the same, but how we're going to get there will change. And the FD can work with you on those strategic options, evaluating them. Do they make commercial sense? Are they financially viable? Go through those different scenarios so that you can ensure that you're still moving towards that end in mind overall. And within that is risk management. Not the most exciting subject, thinking about what can go wrong, but nevertheless really important. And in a strategic context, thinking about what are the big issues that could arise, like a pandemic, for example. So yes, we can't stop everything from happening, but at least if we think it through and have a business continuity plan so that in the event, we can minimize the impact to our business and ensure that worst case scenario, our business survives, then that's effective strategic risk management. So let's move now on to operational finance. And this is all about the systems and the processes and the information that you use for managing your business. It's about getting underneath the skin of the numbers, identifying which customers are profitable, which products and services are making you money, where are you losing money? And the purpose of all this is really to identify opportunities to improve the profitability, cash flow, and ultimately the value of your business. And to illustrate that, I'm going to share with you a case study of a business that we worked with. And it was a profitable business, building services business, but it was burning cash. And in the year before we started working with this business, whilst it was profitable, of profits of 4.6 million, it consumed 3.3 million in cash flow. So we took a look underneath the bonnet of the financials, and we identified that just a 1% improvement across 7 key levers could increase the cash flow of this business by over £1 million and increase profitability by 924,000. So we spoke to the owner, and a classic response, which is why I love working with entrepreneurs, was, if I grow my sales volume by 20%, surely that will resolve my cash flow issues and help me increase my profits. And as you can see from the slide, just a 1% increase in sales growth in this business, if nothing else was done, this business requires 43,000 in cash flow. So it doesn't take a finance genius to realize that if this business continues to grow its sales, but doesn't address some of the other issues, it would eventually run out of cash. It was more complex than that. So we took a deeper dive into the business, and we identified other opportunities that could address the cash flow issues and help increase profitability of this business. As a result of all of that work, we were able to increase the profitability of the business by over £2 million and, more importantly, increase cash flow by 3.8 million, transforming this business from a cash consumer to a cash generator. And as you can see from the slides, pricing was a major contribution in this area. And often when we suggest price increases to some of our clients, we're met with a look of horror, and if I increase my prices, I'm going to lose business to the competition. And that may well be true. So increasing prices across the board is not something that I would recommend. And that was certainly, this business was not an exception. It was a case of working through the different customer groups. Those customers that were less price sensitive, they were more focused on reliability and quality. So we increased the prices in certain areas. Some customers hadn't a price increase for a number of years.
2 minutes, Jeremy.
Great, okay. The result of that was an increase in profit of 2.1 million, and more importantly, an increase in cash flow. Another area was debtor days. And this is an area organisations have enormous amounts of capital tied up in debtor days. And having an active finance function and credit control function, chasing down those debts, talking to customers before payments are due is a great way to reduce that. And indeed, having conversations and setting up terms and conditions even before you start doing business is another way. The other final area was overheads. And Overheads is an area that we would always look at, and doing a deep dive into the cost base, understanding what the cost drivers are, and identifying ways to work more smartly, automate, eliminate non-value added activities altogether. And any savings you make in overheads is going to be straight to the bottom line and help your cash flow. But what does all this mean? We've increased the profitability, the cash flow, but what about the value of the business? Well, as a result of this work, this business increased its value by £10.4 million. And at the time we first started working with this business, if the business had sold, the proceeds from the sale less the debts that the owner had, the owner was effectively in a negative equity position of around 300,000. As a result of the work that we did here, this business is now worth £10 million. And it's important to say at this point, this was only the operational aspects. We hadn't got into the strategic stuff at this point. It was the same customers, the same products and services, but we were managing the financials more effectively. I'm conscious that that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour into the world of finance, but hopefully it's given you some ideas for your businesses. So if you're looking to raise finance or increase the profitability and cash flow, and ultimately the value of your business, then come and talk to us. We'll be delighted to speak to you and take a look under the bonnet of your financials and see how we can help you improve performance and realise your potential.
Jeremy, thank you. Thank you very much indeed. That was a terrific case study, the way you brought that to life. And certainly, if I may say, as an SME of just 6 people at Cambridge Cleantech, not least during the last 12 months, some of those issues related to cash flow and tactical versus strategic have been very much to the fore of how we've been operating. So thank you very much for bringing that to life. Now, moving on, what about the creation of the team for growth and leadership? What I'd like to do now is introduce Claire Vane, who's the director at Integrated Resources, who's going to take us through some ideas around team development and success. Claire, over to you.
Hello, thank you for introducing me, Martin, and thank you for Oriane. I'm going to get away from all the problems of technology, and she's kindly putting my slides up so I can concentrate on what I'm saying. Thank you to Jeremy. Not only do we use the same language, you're coming at it from finance, I'm coming at it from human resource management, but it was good to know that we're complementary and we're saying the same things, the same themes about outcome and so forth. So I'm not going to take you through a whistle-stop tour of HR, and I could take you a whistle-stop tour through employment law and its application. You'll be relieved to know I'm going to concentrate on team success today. So it doesn't need me to repeat. We're all under terrific pressure at the moment. We've had the pandemic, and we locked down on my birthday last year. I will never forget that. And Brexit too has exacerbated what used to be the norm. The norm is not the norm anymore. The stakes have become higher. Leaders have become very polarized. The good ones are few and far between, and my goodness, we notice them. I think we've all commentated, whatever our view of which party, on the lack of statesmen in government, and we see that lack of statesmanship in organisations and the occasional one or two statesmen, which are very noticeable. So we're a team of 11 consultants, and all our work is about releasing potential. That could mean applying employment law effectively, it could be doing recruitment, it can be coaching and using psychometrics, leadership development, performance management, mergers, acquisitions, or restructures. At the moment, we find ourselves very focused on redesign of organisations, making them fit for purpose. And not least reward, as remuneration tends to drive behaviour. So we're a team of 11 women, as it happens, and it is only as it happens, and we concentrate on making sure organisations release their potential. And if you're going to achieve all your desires, then there are certain ingredients I think you need in the mix. And there are a whole number of interventions that we can embark on. Could we possibly move slides, Oriane? And next one.
Yeah.
There are all sorts of different things we can do to bring about behavioural change. And if we invest in our directors and our employees, then we have to be sure that we are bringing about a change and that we can quantify it and qualify it. So there are a whole number of things we can do. We can individually do psychoanalysis and get nearer to our unconscious and find out what triggers certain behaviors and what we're going to do about it. We can do psychotherapy, therapevo to cure, to heal, to help heal some of the baggage we bring to the workplace and to our lives. We can do some sort of counselling for a specific need. We can do coaching, and coaching and mentoring tend to be used in the same breath, but they're very different. The mentor has to be an expert in the thing in which he or she is mentoring in. Coach is a facilitator to bring somebody from A to B. And the last area on the right is training. And I'm going to focus on that in relation to teams. There are certain pieces of work that you can do into individuals and teams to help them be more effective and thus achieve your dreams, your success. As we go to the right, we can become more and more directive. And as we go to the right, we can involve groups of people. But if we don't change behavior and we do spend money on training, development, psychoanalysis, psychotherapy, then we're wasting money. So it is worth looking at what you're doing, why. I think it's first of all worth looking at what's the difference between a team and a group. A team is a group of people, I hope, bound together by the same purpose, the same objectives, moving in the same direction. And we tend to take that for granted. It's worth checking out. If we want team success, then we do need to know that we're all heading in the same direction. We need to know what the objectives, not just of the team, but what the objectives are of each component part in relation to the overall team. So if we're going to have team success, my first proposal is that we agree and write down our objectives. And not in the normal way we do it in appraisals. They're too brief. There's a great deal of research being done on if you write out your objectives in considerable detail, you're more likely to achieve them. So they need to focus around what do you want to achieve? How do you want to achieve it? How are you going to get there? What are the component parts? How long will each piece of activity take? Is it realistic in the world you live in? Have you got the time resources to do X? And how are you going to allocate those? Do you actually diarise it? Are there other people who need to be brought on board? And do you plan ahead, and how? So if you write all these down, then we're on one step towards success for the individual and success for the team. And picking up Jeremy's point, know your outcome, this is absolutely critical. Stephen Covey, in his 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, lists know your outcome as number 2. I regard it as number 1. It's the most important factor, not just in getting team success and individual success, but in doing it time effectively. You need to know not only your own objectives, but your team objectives and each component part. Then you can achieve your dreams, which I hope are your outcomes. So what's your outcome? What's the payback for every single thing you do? Every time you pick up the phone, you embark on a conversation, you make a presentation. What's your outcome? Why are you doing it? Should you be doing it? What's the payback? Why are you there? Why did you pick up the phone? So there are techniques for writing objectives, which I can happily share with you at another time. But knowing your vision of an important part of leadership, writing your objectives in detail is critical. And a team is made up of disparate parts. But the thing that needs to underpin a team is not just the disparate nature of the individuals, but the values they share. Next slide, please, Oriane. So here we have a values model. So an individual has values. We may not think about them, but it's worth really thinking about them. And those drive our thoughts, our feelings and beliefs, which in turn drive our behaviors. The organization also has values. Some of those are articulated and sometimes they're not. And those drive the strategy and the day-to-day operations. And it seems very obvious, but it's often missed by recruiters, that if the values of the individual are not congruent with the values of the organization, we have what we know to our sorrow is called a misfit, and that starts getting expensive. So when we're recruiting to a particular role, we need to look at two sets of competencies, not just technical competencies, know-how, experience, or hard competencies, but also soft competencies, non-technical, what we call leadership, motivation, communication, and the various elements that groups into. So
2 minutes, Claire.
when we're recruiting, we should look at the whole team as well as the individual. So how are we going to do that? We all bring different strengths. Next slide, please. Oriane.
Sorry, yeah.
Thank you. Every single thing we do, we use a problem-solving methodology. First of all, we look at the options, we evaluate these, we make a decision, we implement, and we should evaluate again. And that doesn't mean to say whether it's what you choose for breakfast, what you eat for lunch, what you're wearing today, or a complex problem. We all go through the same cycle. Not everybody brings everything to the cycle. And therein lies the nub. We want complementarity in a team. I went to France last year to run a team building with a top team of a British-based company. They had different language skills, different cultural backgrounds, and I used psychometrics to bring complementarity to the team. It is possible to have a look at who's good at evaluating, who's good at decision-making, who's good at implementing, and who's good at the creativity that generates the options. In my own team, I have a group of people who are evaluators, deliverers, detail-orientated, and outcome-focused. And I'm big picture, high energy, sales, and creative. So we bring complementarity. They couldn't do with 10 of me, but I need 10 of them. So if you want to make of perfect success, when you want it, how you want it, consider the various elements, have a look at the problem cycle, have a vision, know your outcome, articulate objectives in a certain way in considerable detail, and run psychometrics, which you can use for team building, for coaching, or evaluating your shortlist when you're recruiting. If there's a gap in the team, as I found there was when I went to France, I found that everybody was the same type. They'd been recruited by the chief executive. He'd recruited in his own image. They lacked any kind of people orientation, and they lacked creativity. They were so busy jostling for power and jostling for outcome, and were sometimes paralyzed by too much evaluation. So I would recommend having your vision, knowing your outcome, articulating objectives, and using a good psychometric. Happy to talk about that at greater length. I have binned all the other general psychometric tools we use for one called Luminous Spark, which allows you to have more value for your money as you end up with 3 profiles: your underlying profile, your everyday profile, and what is called your overextended profile, what happens to you under pressure. And that means that you can see exactly how people's behavior shifts in certain environments, and that tends to lead to peace and productivity instead of jostling for power and fisticuffs. Thank you.
Claire, thank you very much indeed. Thank you for that. Some key pointers there and some salient points on the key facets of putting that team together as companies grow. Obviously a very important part. It's not just about getting the money, it's getting the right people and the right team in place. And those people should complement each other. You don't want clones of the same person. Absolutely right. Okay, so let's move on to the last speaker, last but not least. It's Paul Egan, who's the Chief Executive of 8 Power. So we have another company that's been got the scars on the t-shirts like Hamish had, and they've grown their company and brought in investment. And Paul, you're going to give us a little case study, a real life case study of a Cleantech company that's doing very well. Paul, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. Yeah, just a couple of words about us. So I'm really going to, I've got kind of one slide on the kind of cuts and bruises of fundraising in 2020, but I've got a couple of slides just about us to give you a bit of context before that. So again, Martin, thanks for the opportunity for us to present here. So my name is Paul Egan, CEO of 8 Power. I've been in and around the tech industry for 30 something years, more than I care to remember. And I've been in Cambridge for at least 25 of those, if not maybe a little bit more. So team we've got around us at the moment, I've got some dedicated professionals, and between us, we've been responsible for some fairly interesting Cambridge technology developments in the past, people like ARM, Certainly my VP of engineering, Martin, people might remember from Verata and Active Book Company and Plastic Logic and lots of those. So in terms of a team, we think we're fairly well positioned to go and do some things there. So quick introduction to us. So we are a company providing what we call fit and forget real-time condition monitoring of industrial assets. So these are motors, pumps, conveyors, various bits of machinery that you may find in industrial types of scenarios. We're focused on UK water at the moment, and I'll come on to that. I've got a couple of points about that later on. But effectively what we want to do is to, at the moment, a lot of people run their industrial assets until they fail. And then there's usually some reactive or some sort of emergency call out to actually fix things. And we think by using condition-based methods, you can move a lot of that maintenance and repair work from the reactive emergency call out to very much more of a planned maintenance approach. We originally came as a spin out from the University of Cambridge Engineering Department, and our unique selling point is really the use of vibration energy harvesting actually in our sensors. So we have some small devices like that we've created that inside there is an energy harvesting device that actually turns vibration from asset operation into electrical power. And then that runs all of the wireless, the sensors and the processor were actually within the sensor itself. So we would attach that to a sensor or to an asset very much like the ones you can see behind me here in my backdrop, and then just actually running the motor or the pump that provides the power for the things there. Okay, so we've recently closed a £2 million round in 2020. The first part of that was in February with an advanced subscription agreement, as Ross went into detail earlier there, and we raised a 1.5 million ordinary round in November as well, and that was with new institutional investors. So I'm quickly just going to talk through what we do. So the problem that we see, and it isn't necessarily just in water, but in lots of industries, there's lots of what we call dark assets out there. Many of them are unmonitored, many of them are unloved, and when they go wrong, it can be expensive, unplanned downtime, it can lead to revenue loss, and in certain industries, it can actually lead to regulatory enforcement as well, particularly in things like energy and water and other sectors like that. Now, some of these assets should be on a maintenance program where people go and inspect them every quarter, every 6 months. Doesn't always happen in some of these industries. So it always can be a surprise sometimes when assets fail. But we think that a solution that really is what we call this fit and forget approach. So it's, you don't have to go back and change batteries. You don't have to be an expert in analyzing what the data is. We just want to have this approach where by monitoring these assets, we can actually tell you before they're going to fail when you've got time to actually go and pick up on that. So we use a variety of sensors actually in our device here. We use vibration, we use sound, we use energy, we use lots of different things to actually work out the asset health, what's actually going on. So a little bit about why we think energy harvesting is so important. Some work we've been doing with ABB has shown us that sensors and edge processing is only going to get smarter. And from what we've seen so far is those smarter sensors are going to need more power. The work we've done so far shows us that bigger batteries and more of them won't really solve the problem, because many of the issues we see are around the actual leakage of the electronics and particularly how these things operate at temperature. And really what we've seen before is that there's no Moore's law for batteries, that while compute may be taking off at the way we've seen for the last 50, 60 years, that certainly isn't happening in batteries. Okay, so that's a little bit about APAL. Let's talk about where we are now. So I'd say for the COVID experience, it's been unbelievably useful to have very, very supportive customers. So particularly getting engaged with our customers very, very early on allowed us to secure some early sales that we thought would just about get us through the pandemic towards the end of the year. Now, obviously, it's been very difficult actually getting equipment on site and site access, but certainly being able to use some of the kind of COVID safe things. So we would always use social distancing when we're doing installs, and we would always use masks and lots of hand washing and all those kinds of things as well. But also just getting the support of customers like ABB and the water companies there, that's enabled us to actually use those names. There are real active discussions going on. And certainly in the fundraising process, we were actually able to place calls with these customers so investors could talk to them about us, so it gives us extra credibility. So experience of fundraising in the time of COVID. So what can we tell you? So when it all really started to kick off in February, March time, we did some planning around 4 scenarios. And the scenarios we planned for were a blip that we thought, oh, it'll all be over in a month or 6 weeks and we'll all go back to normal. There was an interruption that we thought might be 3 months, 4 months, maybe a little bit more. And then there was this idea of lockdown, and particularly we developed this into what we called modulated lockdown, where we would be locked down for the first time, we would go back to work in the summer, and then sure enough, as schools went back, we thought there'd be a second lockdown in the end of the year. And then we obviously planned for full-on apocalypse. We actually ended up executing somewhere between interruption and lockdown for our actual planning. We cut costs to reflect what we actually had in terms of cash, and we had regular weekly meetings just to make sure that we actually had our cash flow against our plan there. We were lucky that we didn't need to furlough anybody, and we didn't need to reduce any salaries at that time as well. So the probably big learning from that is gather as much cash as you can and be really realistic about what your runway is, and particularly your cash out date. We did offer some early discount or some small discounts for early payment, and we were lucky that we did actually get forward payment of the following year's SaaS contract that we've actually got with one of our customers. We closed as many customer projects as we could, and that was everything from small little 10, 15K proof of concept projects right through to kind of some significant six-figure contracts as well. Grants are great if you can get them. We did apply for a smart grant, but we didn't get that. We will be applying for another grant this year. And also, I cannot stress how important it is to accelerate your R&D tax credit. So as soon as you've got end of year, please get on and get that. Our R&D tax credit equated to almost 2 months extra runway by the time it was actually landed. So there's lots of ways you can actually herald, or you can shepherd as much cash as possible to give you the maximum amount of runway. So regardless of the circumstances, regardless of Brexit, I think regardless of COVID, all the principles around fundraising remain the same. And again, cuts and bruises of the last 12 months, I say, would actually bear that out to be true. So you can never start too early. And remember, it always takes longer and it always costs more. So you may go out with a target figure, but you need to remember that there's going to be a whole bunch of costs associated in that. So particularly some of the funds may charge you an arrangement fee that could be multiple percents. And if you have multiple investors coming in, potentially you could be looking at anywhere between 5 and 10% of your funding actually going in fees and services and all the legal costs and things around about that. Starting early, we started our Series A round in September 2019, and we got the ASA closed in February 2020, really before things kicked off. And it took us the rest of the year to get that round closed, of which we went through a couple of false dawns. We had an investor come in very early and said they would do the whole round at a slightly lower valuation than we wanted. When we pressed the go button on that, they suddenly disappeared as COVID kicked in. So we had to kind of reset ourselves and go and look for more guys there. Remember that funding, as someone in the leadership team, potentially as CEO, you've got to do your day job, and your fundraising also becomes your day job. So get as much help as you can. And for me, I would recommend really leveraging your board as much as possible, particularly chairman relationships and other investors you've kind of got on board, and actually probably start with those guys, because if someone's particularly been confident enough to make an investment in you, then there's no reason why they shouldn't follow on that investment and potentially introduce you to other funders as well.
2 minutes, Paul, thank you.
Okay, and it goes without saying that you really do need to try and kiss as many frogs as possible. And I appreciate in these days, it's not the opportunity of actually going and having coffee and spending time with people. It's all going to have to be done virtually. But given all of that that I just mentioned there, we did manage to get the round away, and we are still here. There were dark days, I would say, in the middle of the year when it looked like we may not have got through it as intact as we did. But all I can say in kind of summing up is don't give up. There are investors out there. We know that there is money available. You just need to get out there and go and find them. And that is me, Martin.
Fantastic. Paul, that was terrific. Thank you for sharing that sort of personal insight almost into what you did in the pandemic. Quite reassuring, if I may say, just from a Cambridge Cleantech point of view. That's exactly what we did, those first 2 bullets at the beginning of March. What happens if no money comes in from tomorrow? The sort of apocalypse situation that you mentioned. How long can we last? We knew somebody would come in, of course, but you plan for the worst, and if anything comes better, that's all the better for the company. And of course, exactly. Cash flow as well. We're not raising money, but thank you for sharing those anecdotes and hints and tips about that as well. Terrific. Okay, so just conscious of time, we have some time for some questions, and a couple have come in already. A couple for Hamish, I'll start with, if you're still with us, Hamish, to do with crowdfunding. Christopher Smith was asking, did you have a large cornerstone investments prior to going to crowdfunding?
No, we were unusual in not having a major cornerstone investor. It's certainly advisable to have one. The crowdfunding platforms usually recommend that you have a significant proportion of the fund that you're trying to raise in advance. We did do the sort of standard run around to try and pull in what we could early on, but it was a combination of small investors rather than one big one before we actually launched. And as a percentage, it was much lower than the average, basically, for crowdfunding.
Okay, all right, thank you for that. And also on crowdfunding, but completely different. Are there any statistics on the average number of visits to a crowdfunding website before somebody presses the button and puts some cash in?
I don't know what the average is. We were quite successful on that one in terms of the percentage we were getting, but I don't know if that's a standard program. What was interesting from my point of view was that the longer you stay on, basically, the more money you get. There's no sort of proportionate drop off as far as I can see.
Okay, that's interesting. I mean, the technology is available, because I think there's this issue that if you go on certain travel websites and try to book a flight somewhere, if you keep going back, eventually the price will go up because they know you're coming back for the same flight. That's what I've been told anyway. But no, that's interesting.
Martin, am I allowed to say anything?
By all means, yes.
So it is worth saying to people that actually, Hamish, you'll confirm this, that when people do eventually click the button on a crowdfunding site, they haven't actually given any money. What they are doing is making a commitment, and the money only goes when you've reached the sum that you are seeking to raise or exceeded it. So in your case, obviously, you exceeded the amounts you were looking for. People therefore had made a commitment, and they ended up obviously giving money into the convertible loan. But if you'd failed to reach your target, no money would have gone anywhere.
Yeah, correct.
That's something which people should be aware of.
Okay, thank you for that. I had a question from Clive Bonney, a more general question. How useful is the idea or the requirement for an independent IP audit report, and also for background checks on funders? Does anybody want to take that one up? Maybe the FD Centre, Jeremy? Or Paul, did you do any sort of background checks on funders, or were you happy to take the cash?
No, so for the ASA, we ended up with a whole new bunch of high net worth individuals, some of which were not necessarily UK based. So we had to go through the whole know your customer experience there. And actually we did come quite close to not letting a couple of them in, because just getting documentation from two high net worths in the US, that proved a little bit tricky. Certainly for us, we were targeting institutions, and in the end, we looked at these guys, and they're fairly well-known names in terms of its Low Carbon Innovation Fund and BGF. So we didn't think we had to do any DD on those guys. But certainly it is worth noting, I mean, we had a couple of, I'd describe as tire kickers in terms of investors that when it came down to it, when you had the really crunchy conversations, they kind of melted away. So I think if you can sift out some of those guys early on, it's probably worth doing.
Yeah,
I think, Martin, if I may say something again, it's not only an opportunity for you to check your investors in much the same way as they will expect to check on you. It's actually an obligation. If you're a director of your company and you're seeking new money, and you don't do money laundering and other due diligence on the sources of that money, then you are effectively committing an offence. So it's actually really obligatory for you to check where the money is coming from and who it is, and whether they are, I use the word kosher in a very colloquial sense. But yes, it's actually not something you have a choice about. You have to do due diligence on the money.
Yeah, although that is the advantage of crowdfunding, is that you've got the platform doing it for you rather than yourselves.
Yeah. Okay, all right, thank you to everybody for that. Those are the questions I had from either the chat or that had been asked previously. Does anybody, whilst we're still in the plenary, want to ask any further questions of the speakers before we break into the 3 workshops as detailed on the chat line by Cynthia and Oriane? Anybody want to ask a pressing question in public of anybody? There was a question from David Blackhurst. Does anybody have experience of crowdfunding donations for a not-for-profit company? Interesting angle.
Yeah, it's Kickstarter. Plenty of crowdfunding platforms do that, and that's very successful. In fact, that's how the 3D goggles company started. It's a well-known way of doing things for philanthropic or not-for-profit propositions. But you wouldn't use Crowd Cube or Seeders. You'd use a company called Kickstarter or one of the other similar ones that do that sort of thing precisely for philanthropic purposes.
Okay, thank you. So Kickstarter is an example of the answer to that question. Question from Pooja. What is the right time for planning fundraising for a bootstrapped startup? What should be the typical milestones?
Yeah, yesterday.
Yeah, again, as to my previous point, you can never start too early. And sometimes starting early is about validating your idea. So there's the whole thing in the pub, you know, if I did something like this, would you put money in it? But I mean, even just having some of those kind of sanity check ideas, even before you go to funders, get some feedback from people that you would trust around you in those kind of things before you get involved with the trying to seek any kind of seed funding.
Okay, so bring in the 3 Fs, the friends, family and fools, down the pub or in the home, or, well, you can't get down the pub. Socially distance in the park or somewhere. You'll have to go out and meet one other person at the moment. You could be going for a jog or a cycle ride and ask them what they think of your business proposition as you cycle or jog along. But I think the point is to start early, Paul. Okay, I think we're sort of running out of questions in the plenary. I'm conscious of time. So I think now we're going to go to the breakout session. I just wanted to mention a couple of further events. I've already mentioned the Cleantech Venture Day on the 25th of March. Applications for that open soon. We have an event on the 3rd of February looking at the water sector. We're doing a series of events looking at how our members achieve help to achieve the targets in the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. So the first one is SDG 6 on water on the 3rd of February. So do sign up for that if you have an interest. And then just flipping back to access to finance again, we have a series of events in conjunction with our sister partnership Oxfordshire Cleantech, looking at further aspects to finance, which are all available on our website. And of course, you don't need to travel to Oxford for them. They're all available digitally at the moment, as you would expect. Right, I'm going to hand over to Cynthia or Oriane, who are going to tell us how do we go into the 3 breakout groups, please.
Hi everyone, I'll take this one. So
thank you, Oriane.
There's 3 rooms. The first one is with Paul and Jeremy. The second one is with Hamish and Claire, and then the third one with you from Cambridge Cleantech. I've done my best to put everyone in the rooms that I wanted to be. The room will open soon, and if you just go there, and then I'll join every single room to make sure everyone's happy. So if I've forgotten anyone, don't worry. I'll be joining the room and making sure that you've been put in the room you wish to be in.
And what do we do, Oriane? Does something appear? Oh, something just appeared on our screen.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Have just received something.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. See you soon.